Hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Mike Noble, and I'll be the host for this TLC session. It takes a village, working collaboratively with virtual academic support teams. This presentation will be presented by Dr. Michelle Rosser Majors, Academic Chair, College of Health and Human Services, Dr. Marjorie Estivill, Faculty Support and Development Associate 2, and Millie Jones, the lead writing and learning specialist at Ashford Writing Center. We're excited that you have joined us today to hear Michelle, Marjorie, and Millie. The chat window will be open during the session, so please feel free to participate and ask questions. Michelle, it's all yours.
Thanks, Mike. I've got my slides kind of going a little berserk on me here. Here we go. I want to welcome everyone. We're really excited to present this information to you today. As we all know, in the online environment, it's becoming more and more important to work together collaboratively, and that's not always the easiest. And so we're hoping today that our little group can give you a little insight on some of the barriers, as well as how to work through those barriers. So first of all, as we know, it does take a village. Every one of us knows that saying. From the process of supporting a student from enrollment to graduation, it's very complex. You know, students go through different phases and different needs, and so often it takes all of our expertise to help a student, but it's not always easy to work together virtually. And again, often members of our team, they're developed in different ways to help students in different ways. And then this diverse expertise actually will help support our students better when offered to the student in the best way. So it is designed to help each of us better understand this process of cross-functional and interdepartmental collaboration and how to make it work. So basically, some of the things that we're going to look at is what exactly is cross-functional and interdepartmental collaboration. What are the challenges of these? And then what are some of the strategies to support strategies? And why does it really even matter if we work in this way? So first, we're going to talk about exactly what cross-functional collaboration is versus interdepartmental. Cross-functional is a group of people with different functional expertise coming together to work toward a common goal. So that can happen within a department, that can happen, in our case, within a program. But then we look at interdepartmental, and that's related to or conducted between two or more different departments. So in our case at Ashford University, we often have both of these that we're working with. So, but there are barriers, and we want to be very transparent about some of these barriers because it's not the easiest to do. And we know that we each struggle trying to figure out who to contact for different things, or we find out other people are doing things that we didn't know about. And so we just want to look at some of these barriers because the better that we know the barriers, the better we can work through them. So the first thing is the silo effect, and we're going to talk a little bit about that. It's probably one of the largest pieces of information that we found about the difficulty in working in this environment collaboratively. So basically, you know, the research is saying that the opportunities for innovation require us to really integrate cross-functional solutions, but it also talks about these silo effects. And so the silo effect occurs when an organization is not communicating successfully. And basically, that's when you feel alone, you feel by yourself. So it can stay private and anonymous. We're going to put up a poll here, and I would really like for each of you to answer if you feel like you've ever felt like you were experiencing a silo effect. Did you feel like you were by yourself, you were alone in making the decisions or taking care of things that you needed to tell and take care of? Good. We've got almost half of everybody. And if you haven't ever had a silo effect, we definitely want your communication toward the end of this to say how you've managed to do that, because that can be difficult. About 9. Okay, so we're about 78%. I don't know if I can share with you. We're at 78% yes, having experienced a silo effect. I can. There's share the results. And so that's where we're at right now. And so it's very important that we realize that if we're experiencing the silo effect or feeling like we're by ourselves, it's very, very normal, and it's just something we have to purposefully work through. So in the chat, what we'd like you to look at too is some of these questions. And again, only share what you're comfortable with sharing, but do you recall when what it was like when you first felt experiencing a silo? Did you ever feel like no one cared about you because you live so far from everything else happening? Were you ever feeling a bit low on the totem pole because you were on the outside? Maybe you worked at a different site, maybe you work remote, or did you ever feel like you're all alone when trying to achieve the goals? Because it's normal. So I'm going to open my chat, and my colleagues are going to be monitoring that as well and see what you guys have to kind of say about that. Anyone want to share about their feelings about feeling a silo? Okay, well, what we will talk about, it was 78% of you were, and as Margie laughs, it can be difficult to share those. Working remotely just causes that, absolutely, Alan. And as we note at the bottom of this slide, geographical distribution also really has barriers, and we're going to look about why that is the case, but how we can also make that better. What I will quickly share is from my own point of view. I'm getting a few more chats here. Let me make sure I'm not missing anything. And Millie and Margie, jump in if I do miss something. It can affect motivation, Jennifer, and that's something else we're going to talk about, because reduced motivation reduces performance. And again, with what we do, especially in our environment, performing well, helping our students succeed is the prime target and what we need to do. But I know for me, there was a time, and not so much anymore, where I didn't even know who was in other departments. I didn't, and I hate to even mention this, but on transparency, and this was many moons ago, I didn't even know we had a program chair in my program at that point. So our culture in our particular university, I feel like, has really changed over the last few years, but it still takes really purposeful attention to making sure that you come out of those silos successfully. Felicia shares, a few of the associate faculty expressed concern about this a few years back. One faculty member started coordinating a once-a-month lunch. Yes, it was extremely thoughtful. And again, we can share as we go along about ways you feel like we've decreased silos. And I think Felicia would be a great witness to what we've been working on in my program, but we're going to share it from all sides, because Millie and Margie are also extremely important to what we all do here, as well as we looked at several people within the institution to include in this particular presentation, because all of us have important roles in helping our students be more successful. So basically looking at the geographical distribution and the barriers and making sure that it's really transparent on why that's the case. And again, probably one of our biggest issues, I would say, within Ashford, just because we are all over the country, we have 4 different headquarter type sites or subsites, 3 subsites, 1 headquarters. And so we did want to look at what the research says. And so this is not me or my colleagues saying, this is what's happening, but this is what the research says about it. So common structures, and this is kind of what we see here, is the hub and spoke model, where there is an absolute headquarters. And what can happen in that is the culture and the communication style of what's happening in the headquarters can typically dominate. A concern with that is, obviously, if it's a culture of perhaps one coast over the other, yet we have employees that are working all across the country, those cultures differ. So it can be difficult for people that are outside of those cultures to really feel like they're engaged in a part of that community. Remote employees can experience or may perceptually feel like they are a lower status, and that needs and performance are invisible to others. So I know something familiar to what I feel like my associate faculty, and we're trying to do a lot better job at that, is they do a great job, and they don't get to hear that all the time. They don't have monthly meetings. We don't have weekly meetings to say, you're doing a great job. And so that can be tough, because you just feel like, well, why do I matter? What I'm doing doesn't really matter, but when it really does. Members of geographically distributed teams are often not evenly dispersed. That can be difficult, because you have on-site that may be perceptually get more perks than, say, off-site, or on-site doesn't like the fact that remote gets to work from home, and so you get all of these different perceptions happening that can actually create resentment. They can create just a shutdown between different departments. And also, again, going back to those distributed teams on site may have a particular culture where each person working remote doesn't have that cultural barrier. They have their own culture, which may look very different than all the people they work around. So diverse cultures can also create perceptions of disrespect. So people, when something is said a certain way or handled a different way, again, that can sometimes be driven by culture. And we can get our feelers hurt. And it's just really, really important to work through that, to open up communications. And we're going to talk about some really great ideas that I do think our university has done very well over the last couple of years to help fight things like that. Also, lastly, the large or uneven employee distribution can create feelings of resentment toward those on site and vice versa. So some of the things just on a shallow level that we can do to fight this, and then we'll get into some very more specific things about why we do this and how we can do it, is bridging gaps. You know, finding gaps where we don't know someone else or we don't know who to contact, and making sure we're keeping notes and filling those gaps so that we feel like we have more of an understanding of who our contact is or what's going on can be helpful. Building trust with one another. You know, when my colleagues Margie and Millie and I met, we talked a lot about that and how, you know, trusting that the people you're working with will get their jobs completed and that they'll do their jobs well, that they'll communicate with you when they need you, they'll tell you thank you when they need you, and how important that is. But also building a trust, for instance, you know, with Margie, and she'll share a little bit more about this. She's an FSDA. She's highly important to the success of what's happening in that classroom if there's an issue and different things. But also sometimes there may be more trust between an instructor and their lead than an FSDA, so they may go one direction instead of both directions, when perhaps the FSDA may have more options for you. So I always say, CC anybody you think is going to help you, and one of them will figure it out for you. On the same instance, Millie and the Writing Center, I know I've gone there more than one time when we've had an issue and said, Millie, help! And she is spot on for sending me resources and all these things that might take me an hour to research. She can send them to me, and so really building trust, but she knows that I'm not just asking her for these things just to waste her time. She knows I'm using those things. I'm sending those things out. I'm trying to advance the knowledge of instructors with the things she shares, and vice versa. I totally trust that what she's giving to me, which are always fabulous, great things. And the same thing with Margie and her team. I can send an email, I feel like at this point, and always know they're going to handle it. Meeting face-to-face. This is something I feel like we also talked about that improves that trust when we can see one another, when we also, it helps us to feel more a part of someone. We're going to talk a little bit more about that here in a few minutes, but I can't tell you how even going to this past graduation changed for me personally, because I'd seen people face to face. I felt like I could go give a hug or, you know, wave across the room because I knew people. And it really helped me build those relationships that I need to help me when I'm faced with a situation with a student or with a course issue or other things that are happening. Another thing that often doesn't happen is respect for locations, and that can be difficult. We have 4 differing time zones in our own university, and so lunches, I know that can be difficult when you're in the middle of the country and you eat lunch doing meetings every day, but also having a healthy respect of what that looks like to some of the employees. And again, having a healthy respect for that and an appreciation for the fact that they may not take lunches because they have to be at meetings, and trying to kind of work around those locations as well. Lastly, in the research, it talks about using our community resources. And we tried to point out that Estivill and Canvas is a great place to go and often ignored to an extent. And the more people use these sites, the better we can make these resources. Other resources that I find extremely helpful, again, go back to our library, our writing center. We have discussed how many additional resources all these sites have started to provide for us, but we need to communicate about that, and we need to go there and learn, because again, when they have resources and we don't have to create, or we have resources they don't have to recreate, and we all work together, we're all extremely perform much better and much more efficiently. So lastly, on some of the strategy parts, and again, we'll get into why, and thank you to the team for pointing this area of literature out, because one of the articles that said leaders need to lead. And that seemed obviously just very bold and a little bit brass. And so colleagues came together and said, there's research out there about being a shepherd. And so looking into that, I think this is a really important piece of our presentation today, is that if you're in a leadership position, and I remind you, probably everyone in this room, and most students even, because you have careers out there too if you're in the room, you lead in some way. You lead in your families, you lead in a department, you're a leader in your organization, but there's the pretense that has to happen as a leader. So if you lead part-time faculty, if you lead other staff members, if you lead other people that work with other departments, it's really important to do some of these things. So protect and guide. Make sure that they have a place of protection to go when they need you, whether it's a student issue or it's just a bad situation going along. Protect them, be there for them, and help guide them to make good decisions on what needs to happen and work together. Increase a sense of belonging. Again, that one's a big, tough one, extremely important, but virtually it's almost even more important. How do you do that? We're going to give you some of these ideas and tell you our stories on this second half of this. Meet their needs. Remember, different people have different needs. So everybody in your little department, they all may have different needs. And it's important whether you have 2 people on your staff or you have 200 on your staff, that you try to figure out what they need from you. Provide opportunities for growth and development. How does that happen? What does that look like? What I've found with a pretty large faculty that I manage, it looks different again. Some people prefer emails and links. Some people prefer modules. Some people prefer a phone call. Some people prefer video. And as we share some of our experiences, we'll share more of that. Provide rest when needed. I found this really interesting because of how busy I know our particular institution has been over the last year, is to be cognizant of your teams and when they need a little downtime. What we do is extremely important, so it also becomes very emotional and sometimes tiring. So it's good to be really aware of what's happening with your folks. Rather than drive, walk your team. Be careful not to drive. We drive for success. We drive for numbers. We drive for this. We need this to improve. We need that to improve. Walk with them in this, because if not, they're going to walk away. And that's important, that we're all working on this together. And everything should be joint decision-making when possible. Embrace healing environments. Sometimes that can be difficult. Again, going back to the resentment things, always embrace trying to make relationships better. Again, different people can feel like bad things have happened. So being that example for that. Lead by example. Model in your classrooms to one another, etc. Know when your team needs additional support. Again, that for leaders is about being aware. Know your team. Have your team's best interest in action. I reflect on numbers. I know in our program, in our college, in our institution, we worry about retention, which is extremely important, but I also need to make sure that I'm extremely balancing my own team's needs and have their interest in what I'm doing, whether it's how I design a course to be more reflective of supporting them and their time restraints, etc. Be willing to stand up for your team members. As a leader, that's important as well. And be good to those who call you leader. Respect that relationship, especially virtually. Respect the people that help you, and be very aware that we have to communicate that. And we'll talk a bit more about that communication piece. So why does it all matter? Have you heard the phrase, jack of all trades is a master of none? That's kind of what we get into with this a little bit, is we all want to believe we're all these experts. Well, we are, but often we're experts in different areas, and we lose sight of that. So we want to encourage you as we give you our stories and give you some insight on how to work with one another virtually, and what a blessing it is that it makes us stronger. It makes us see the bigger picture better. And again, hopefully our examples will reiterate that. So let's take a look at some of, what successful cross-functional interdepartmental strategies look like. So the first one is increase, and I apologize, we always have these little things that jump up in front of my screen so I can't see anything. Increase potential solutions and ideas. Often we get quiet One huge important part about working interdepartmentally, cross-functionally, especially virtually, is you have to share your ideas. And you have to be willing to hear other people's ideas and not knock people down for those ideas. Or say, someone else that's doing that. Tell them, share your ideas, share what's going on. Joining committees, setting up program and college level presentations about what you're doing. Recording those, sharing those out, let people know, creating community, share ideas, tell your colleagues your ideas, share your passions, send inquiry emails to your leadership. Hey, is this going on? Do you know anybody doing these things? Market yourself by disseminating what you know. And again, be respectful to one another about that sharing. And then shadow other teams. So I'm going to start with my first example, and then we're going to move on to some others. Shadowing other teams is probably the best thing I ever did, and I did it earlier this year. I actually shadowed matriculation, who, to be quite honest, I didn't know even existed at the time when I went to San Diego. And what I learned was some of the things that inhibit them from doing things I needed them to do for my students, based on enrollment and seeing when the transcripts came in and how do we know where to put them. And so what we were able to do from that experience was I was able to go back to our program and say, okay, let's resequence this way. Let's put a prereq here to make sure students are placed in a good place until we know what that transcript looks like. I would have never even known that that was an issue had I not shadowed. I've also recently this year met with advisors and academics, and as a program chair, I cannot tell you the difference it's made to hear from them what they're experiencing with students, what they're up against when a student says, I don't want that class, I need this class, how to communicate with advisors, how to set up things so that it's better for them, how to set up communication so they know they can contact me. Been a great thing. I totally advise everyone that can or ever will shadow other teams, shadow the FSDAs up in Clinton, shadow the Writing Center if you ever get a time, even if it's virtually shadowing, be around. It was a great experience. So number 2, why we should. Let's see if it's going to go for me. There we go. Have a better understanding of the people who have diverse skills. Again, you can see the bigger picture. Me knowing Margie, me knowing Millie, me knowing Cole and Emily, and I could go on and on and on, has actually really helped me see the bigger picture. It's increased the empathy about what they go through. So I don't send an email anymore that says, this needs to be done. I know what they run up against in certain situations. So it helps us see the bigger picture. It helps us view issues and demands and different things from everyone's perspectives. And it really makes working together a much more positive experience. And so next, Millie is going to share about camaraderie.
Yeah, thanks, Michelle. So with the Writing Center, we work with a lot of different departments. And what I have found is that building relationships has been such an important part of the job. And it helps me to work more effectively and more efficiently. But also, it just makes the job more meaningful and just it's more of a happy experience for me when I do work from home, but when I come to things like this, and I recognize people's names that I've worked with in the past, it just creates a better social environment, and it makes me happier with my job. A couple of examples to illustrate some of what I mean by effectiveness and efficiency in the job. Couple of teams, one, for example, are advisors. They had reached out to me in the past about presenting the Writing Center supports to their new advisors coming on, and I did that, and that was nice. It started a relationship, right? Another time they asked me to come and talk to some more veteran advisors who had been there for a while, and I got a chance to really listen to them and know what students are asking them. And I realized, gosh, I'm giving them a lot of information. Let me build them a tip sheet that they have. And what that showed was that we're really all on the same team. We're all trying to support students, right? And it just created a really nice bond between the Writing Center and advisors, where they know they can reach out to me, and also I know I can reach out to them. There are just this week I was working with a student with some special circumstances, and I needed to figure out who who that student's advisor is. Well, I didn't really know how to go about doing that. It's not something I typically do in my job. But because I had connections with advisors, I could very easily reach out to someone, hey, who do I know over there? Reach out to them. And even if it's not the exact right person, they were very quick to get back to me. Why? Because we had this relationship already. There is this understanding that Millie's here to support me and I'm going to support her with what she needs. So that was really nice. Another example I can give is with career services. A couple of years ago, they reached out to the Writing Center about creating a guide, a tip sheet for writing an after interview email. We worked with them on that. It was started a great relationship. I also learned, hey, what does career services do for students? And just this year, when we were getting a lot of students asking us for help with writing resumes, cover letters, I was able to reach out to career services and get collaboration with them. And again, they were very willing to do so. I didn't feel like I was reaching out to like cold calling someone that I didn't know at all, right? There was already that started relationship. And that's specifically because it started with someone reaching out to someone else to get some help, to get some support, even if it wasn't necessarily the right person, or even if they didn't know what the Writing Center could do, just to ask. It really created that relationship that has just continued and continued to strengthen. And again, it just makes my job more rewarding, and we're all doing a better job, more efficient, effective job at supporting students.
Thank you, Millie. Absolutely. And there was a comment in the chat, so I'll just mention that picture of Kate. That was my example from earlier. Kate and I, we've seen each other online. We've worked a little bit together. She's an incredible woman if no one knows her. But I mean, it was all hugs. Camaraderie is so important. And I know some people in this room, as I was going through the room real quick while Millie spoke, and I was like, oh, yeah, I know her, and oh, this happened. And it just makes your job a bigger blessing when you can go through things and say, oh, I wish I could hug a person around the neck, but I'm really glad I know that person. So that is a great thing. Okay, so on this, we're going to let Millie and Margie talk a little bit about this one.
Okay, well, my main example's on the next one, but I'm going to say that this fourth benefit of collaboration is a better understanding of support processes and procedures, and that's actually pretty important. Your library staff members, advisors, access staff, career services, tech people, and BTS, Canvas, CETL people, we all work with faculty working to resolve problems affecting students. So you can think of it as we administrators are like a lubricant for the cogs of the machinery of our school. And specifically, the Center for Excellence in Teaching and Learning and the Faculty Support and Development Associates, we're like the catalysts for effective collaboration, drawing key personnel into involvement with specific problems that are stopping students from making progress. And so in our meetings and emails, we spread the fruits of our experiences in policy and procedure implementation to de-escalate those angry students and generally work faculty through the sticky problems to get the students back to learning. I think Millie then has a special kind of knowledge lubricant for that task of student learning.
Right. So the Writing Center works with faculty during the curriculum development process, and we sort of touched on this a little bit throughout the presentation that if the Writing Center already has something created, or even the library or any other part of this puzzle has something created, then faculty don't feel like I need to create something from scratch, right? I do know that faculty have been surprised, oh, this is something that the Writing Center maybe doesn't have, but oh, they're willing to create a resource like this. So I can focus on what I'm best at, and they can create a resource that's more related to writing or plagiarism, something like that. So that's really nice to just know what other teams already have materials created or who you can reach out to. And what I find is that the more people I reach out to, then it just sort of starts a buzz. They tell someone, oh, the Writing Center has these great plagiarism resources, and it just sort of spreads because we all are good at our jobs, but our jobs are not necessarily outreach or marketing, right? So even when like the idea of sharing what we're doing isn't really easy for some of us, right? We're doing all the things, we're creating this great work, but the idea that we have to share those with others so that people even know who they can reach out to, or that we have these great resources, these great people, that can be hard. So even just starting it a little bit can really just make it spread a little bit more. But the Writing Center, a lot of faculty, especially for faculty who are developing courses, are aware of this, but there are a lot of faculty who aren't aware of the resources that the library or the Writing Center has available. For example, HTML announcements about writing that you can just copy and post into your course. That's something that, it's out there available for you. And you don't have to, as a faculty member, you don't have to take the time to create these for yourself. There's so much support out there, but it really does start with connecting with somebody. Even if it's not exactly the right person, they can typically put you in touch with the right person.
Absolutely. Thank you, Millie and Margie. And I would say that, many a times how I've put several people on and said, who do I contact, and always get a good answer back. Margie, I'll let you do number 5. I know we're getting down on time a little bit.
Yeah, we're totally down on time. It's at time. Here's a minute and 30 seconds of an example that might help somebody in a specific situation. So here's a story about a tech logjam that impacted the FSDA effectiveness and how it was cleared. So the FSDAs had a Tableau dash that told us which courses have incomplete instructor tasks. One part of our dash broke. We were told nobody could fix it. The breakdown really impacted us by increasing the amount of time we needed for that aspect of monitoring from about 30 minutes to 3 to 4 hours every week for each one of us as we went into courses to manually count discussion forum replies. So we get, in my department, we get to choose our battles in some cases. I claim this one. So I started by writing a BTS ticket, and I told him about how badly the workaround was impacting us and blah, blah, blah for nearly 2 years. The senior Tableau engineer realized we didn't know the procedural steps for getting our problem repaired. He said the main problem was that BTS couldn't legitimate spending time to fix that tool without having a clear indication of how a fix would impact the ROI, the return on their labor investment to fix our problem. They wanted to know what would be the benefit to the student or institutional effectiveness. So I researched, wrote up a report on how it impacted FSDA effectiveness, how many labor dollars a week it cost for 18 people to use the workaround, and that gave BTS everything they needed in order to get permission to fix our problem. It was just a matter of we didn't know the procedure.
Absolutely. So getting a hold of, another department can help make what you need happen. Excellent. So basically, increased knowledge equals increased success. And that's why we want to really encourage each of you to be more purposeful about reaching out across the departments. You got to get your word out. You got to toot your own horn. Don't keep your goals a secret, and negotiate. Learn what others do, work with others, and take a chance and reach out across those miles, because it does make a difference. Pick up the phone, log on face-to-face, say hi to one another, check on each other, support each other, and collaborate. And we thank you for coming, and would love to have any questions.
Well, I am actually going to have to, I'm going to have to wrap us up. We are over time, but I would suggest that if you want to, Michelle, Millie, and Marjorie, please go ahead and put your email in the chat really quick so that everyone has it and they can reach out to you. I just want to thank each of you for an amazing session. I was actually writing my own questions because you were just so engaging, and I thought, oh my gosh, I want to ask this, and we didn't get to it. So I'll be emailing them as well. I just want to thank Michelle, Marjorie, and Millie for the presentation, and for each of you for joining us today. Thank you, and enjoy the rest of TLC.
Thanks, everyone.